UCP 600 is considered as the core guiding documentary rules for documentary credits or the letter of credit. Its every article has depth on handling the documentary credit cycles. Today, we are diving deep into a cornerstone of international trade finance, Article 4 of the UCP 600. So, welcome back and let's begin. It might sound a bit technical, right? But trust me, understanding this article is crucial for anyone involved in letters of credit. So grab a cup of tea or coffee and let's get started. Article 4 is titled Credits versus Contracts. The very first line, Article 4a, sets the tone. A credit by its nature is a separate transaction from the sale or other contract on which it may be based. This is the principle of autonomy, or the independence principle. It's the bedrock of how letters of credit, or LCs, function. So what does this actually mean in practice? Imagine an exporter in Vietnam sells 1,000 bags of coffee to an importer in Germany. They sign a sales contract detailing the quality, price, and shipping terms. To secure the payment, the German importer asks their bank to issue a letter of credit in favor of the Vietnamese exporter. Now we have two distinct agreements. The first is the sales contract between the buyer and the seller. The second is the letter of credit, which is an undertaking by the issuing bank to pay the seller, provided the seller presents specific documents. Article 4 says these two agreements are completely separate. The bank's duty is to deal only with the documents required by the LC. It doesn't care about the underlying sales contract. The bank is not concerned if the coffee beans are the wrong grade, or if the shipment is delayed, or even if the bags contain sand instead of coffee. The only job of bankers is to check if the documents presented by the seller, like the bill of lading, commercial invoice, and insurance certificate, strictly comply with the terms of the letter of credit. Let us say the LC requires a commercial invoice for 1,000 bags of Grade Arabica coffee. The exporter presents an invoice stating exactly that. The bank will see this as a complying presentation. Now, if the importer in Germany receives the shipment and discovers the coffee is actually Grade B Robusta, they can't instruct their bank to refuse payment under the LC. Why? Because the bank's obligation is to the documents, not the physical goods. The documents were correct. The importer's dispute is with the exporter, based on the sales contract. They would have to seek remedy through other legal channels, like suing for breach of contract, but the bank must pay. This separation is vital. It gives the seller security. They know if they produce the right paperwork, they will get paid by the bank, regardless of any disputes with the buyer. This is what makes LCs such a powerful tool in international trade, bridging the trust gap between parties who may have never met. Now let's look at the second part of Article 4, which says banks are in no way concerned with or bound by such contract, even if any reference whatsoever to it is included in the credit. This is a critical point. Often, an LC will include a reference to the underlying contract, something like, "This credit relates to pro forma invoice number 123 dated January 1st, 2025. You might think this reference links the LC to the contract, right? Wrong. Article 4 makes it clear that even with such a reference, the bank is to disregard the contract entirely. The reference is considered, in the language of trade finance, as for information purposes only. Why is this rule so strict? Imagine the chaos if it were not. If banks had to verify performance under the sales contract, they'd need to become experts in every industry imaginable. They'd have to inspect goods, understand complex technical specifications, and mediate disputes. It would be impossible and would grind international trade to a halt. The efficiency of the LC system relies on banks being document checkers, nothing more. There's a famous legal case that really cements this principle, Urquhart Lindsay versus Eastern Bank. In this case, the bank refused to pay under an LC because the buyer claimed the seller had breached the underlying contract. The court ruled firmly in favor of the seller, stating that the bank's obligation under the credit was absolute and independent of any disputes related to the contract. The bank had to pay. This brings us to Article 4B. It states, an issuing bank should discourage any attempt by the applicant to include, as an integral part of the credit, copies of the underlying contract, pro forma invoice, and the like. This is practical advice from the ICC, the body that writes the UCP rules. They are essentially telling banks, do not let your clients clutter the LC with unnecessary details from the sales contract. Why? Because it creates confusion. If a buyer insists on attaching the entire 20-page sales contract to the LC, it raises questions. Is the bank now responsible for checking compliance with every single clause in that contract? Article 4A says no, but the presence of the contract creates ambiguity. A document checker at the bank might get confused about which terms are part of the LC and which are just contractual noise. For example, the sales contract might specify packaging in export-worthy, double-lined jute bags, but the LC itself might only ask for a packing list. If the full contract is attached, does the packing list now need to mention the double-lined bags? This ambiguity leads to disputes, delays, and defeats the purpose of an LC, which is to provide certainty. So the best practice is to extract only the necessary documentary conditions from the sales contract and state them clearly and precisely within the letter of credit itself. Instead of attaching the contract, the LC should explicitly state, for example, packing list must certify goods are packed in export-worthy, double-lined jute bags. Now it's a clear documentary requirement, not a contractual one. This keeps the process clean and focuses everyone on the documents. To recap, Article 4 establishes the vital principle of autonomy. First, the letter of credit is a separate transaction from the sales contract. Banks deal in documents, not in goods or the performance of the contract. Second, even if the LC mentions the contract, banks are not bound by it. That reference is for information only. And finally, banks should actively discourage applicants from including the full contract within the LC to avoid ambiguity. Understanding this separation is the key to mastering letters of credit. It protects the seller by guaranteeing payment upon presentation of correct documents, and it protects the banking system by limiting the bank's role to that of a neutral document examiner. The dispute over the quality of the coffee beans? That's for the buyer and seller to resolve based on their contract, the payment against the documents. That's the bank's world, governed by the UCP 600, and specifically the powerful principle laid out in Article 4. I hope this detailed breakdown makes Article 4 crystal clear. It's a short but mighty article that truly defines the nature of letters of credit. If you found this helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into trade finance. Let us know in the comments if you have any questions or experiences with this principle. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.